All right, here we are reading the ruined. Oops, let me unmute myself. Here we are reading The Ruined City. Aliford, Basement Dreams. The darkness was so thick that no light could ever pierce it. Yet Howard was aware, so he wasn't dead. Was he mad? Was he lost in a dream world just like his father? But Howard could remember, think, and reason. Maybe he was in a coma. Perhaps a slowly exploding blood vessel in his brain was dooming him to lie for years in a hospital bed, hooked up to medical devices, alive but unaware of anything around him. Yet Howard was standing. He could feel the ground beneath his feet, and he was cold. He stretched out his arms to find walls on either side. They weren't the smooth, painted walls of the basement corridor, however. They were rough and wet and slimy. Howard shuddered at the feel of them. He stretched an arm above his head and discovered a dripping roof. Streamers of repulsive, feathery slime wrapped themselves around his fingers. Disgusted and terrified, he tore his hand free. He reached behind and found another wet wall. In a sudden panic, Howard lurched forward, scared to death that he was trapped in a tiny, foul cave. But there was no wall in front of him, and he fell to his knees. He let out several gasping sobs. He wasn't dreaming, dead, mad, or in a coma. He was alive and aware in a gross stone tunnel. But how had he gotten here? Where was he, and how could he get back? Where were Kate and his dad? Howard called their names as loudly as he could. He yelled, he screamed. It was hopeless. The darkness in the walls swallowed all sound. In frustration, he struck out and scraped the walls around him. It did no good, but the pain at least confirmed that he was alive. Exhausted, he slumped in his haunches and wept. Haunches, I'm not sure what that is, so remember I can mouse over something.
Haunch.
Oh, his hindquarters or his hip. Okay, so he's like sat on his hip. Okay. He sat for seconds, hours, days, years. Time meant nothing in this darkness. At least his tears ceased. He took a deep breath of the dank air and stood. He had never been so afraid. He listened hard, praying for noise of some sort, then praying that there was nothing in the darkness to make a noise. The silence was as complete as the darkness, and Howard's mind filled both with barely imaginable horrors. What was this place? It was real. Howard had no doubt about that. It felt like no nightmare he'd ever had. The walls, the sloping floor, the slime, they all felt too real, too solid, too genuine. And everything was consistent. Nothing changed the way it did in dreams. Howard was rational. He could even think his way. Could he even think this way in a dream? In a dream, could he question that he was in a dream? Was his physical body somewhere other than the AIPC basement? Had he blacked out and he was now awake somewhere else? If so, where? When? Why? Had he been abducted by aliens? There were no answers. A wave of anger overwhelmed him, pushing aside the rising terror. "This is impossible!" he yelled into the silent darkness. "It's not real. I can't be here. I'm not here. I'm standing beside Kate and my dad at the end of a corridor leading to a boiler room in the basement of the Aliford Institute for Psychiatric Care." His voice rose. "There's a slow cooker filled with vegan chili simmering on the counter at home. My mom's somewhere with a bunch of flakes learning how to get in touch with her inner self through the cosmic harmony." He was screaming now. "I'm about to wake up in the institution basement or at my bed at home. I don't really care where. Just let me wake up, please." Howard opened his eyes to darkness, cold walls, and dripping slime. He felt overwhelmed, helpless, powerless. But as he calmed down, he became aware of cold air against his face. It was coming from the tunnel ahead. Was this a way out? Shuffling his feet, he stumbled forward. What else could he do? He kept his arms out, feeling his way along the repellent wall on either side and the roof above. Gradually, he noticed that the walls were edging in and the roof was lowering. Howard had to crouch to prevent the tendrils of slime from dragging across his face. What if the walls and roof narrowed so much he had to crawl? What if he got stuck? He'd be trapped in this hideous tunnel until he died of thirst or starvation, or lost what little sanity he had left. He heard a soft, rhythmic rattling sound, and there was a smell, faint but unmistakable. Alaford and the AIPC, meant to turn the page, were miles from the coast, but Howard could smell the salt tang of the sea and hear waves breaking gently on the beach. He had the strange feeling that the tunnel walls were gone. Gingerly, he straightened and stretched. He took several steps forward and found himself standing on a rocky beach, his feet sinking into the round, wet stones, his view illuminated by a low, full moon. Small waves broke with a whisper. Howard gaped at the inky expanse of ocean. To his right, a dark peninsula stretched out to sea. It appeared to be pointing at a vantage, white blotched near the horizon. A movement there caught Howard's attention. As he stared, the surface of the ocean seemed to bulge. It rose to impossible heights, and then violent white torrents of water cascaded off, revealing a black island. In the bright moonlight, Howard could make out the shattered remnants of a colossal, ruined city scattered over the slopes of the hill that formed the center of the island. Massive blocks of polished black stone cut in intricate shapes that seemed to defy geometry lay everywhere. The smooth stone surfaces were covered with deeply incised hieroglyphs that he somehow knew were words in ancient language that no human voice had ever uttered. In the center of the awful wreckage, several of the blocks were interlocked, each fitting exactly into its neighbor along mortarless joints and surrounding an arch of impenetrable blackness, out of which blew an icy wind. As he watched, mesmerized, Howard noticed movement. The fallen blocks and pillars were covered with a host of loathsome sea creatures, many crawling on all fours, their disgusting swollen bellies dragging over the stone. Others were slithering into the water and swimming toward him with powerful strokes, the crest on their heads and backs cutting through the waves like shark fins. Unable to tear his eyes away, Howard watched in horror as the repulsive fishmen swam closer. A cloud swept across the moon, plunging the view into black.